Senior ANC leaders could face U.S. sanctions after the House of Foreign Affairs Committee passed a bill reviewing ties with South Africa. The bill, backed by a Republican majority, targets South Africa over its genocide case against Israel at the ICC and ties with China, Russia, as well as Iran. The bill needs approval from Congress and the Senate before President Trump can sign it into law. We now speak to the former South African ambassador to the United States, Ebrahim Rasool. Ambassador, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. What do you make of the optics around the proposal of the bill that was tabled in April, and now we are in July, and there was a meeting that took place in between April as well as July, the May meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa as well as the US President Donald Trump? It almost seems as though some may argue that that particular meeting may have not done much to clear the air from what at least the Republicans and some Democrats believe South Africa's stance to be, and that of undermining the interest of the United States.
Yeah, and I think it is correct that the optics show that that meeting may not have had the great impact, because since then, not only do we have Ronnie Jackson's bill that has passed the House Foreign Affairs Committee, but that we have also had a 30% tariff imposed on South African goods. We have had a threat of 10% for being members of BRICS. And I think that, that to a large extent, this idea that we now have the possibility of ANC leaders being sanctioned is an old idea that comes from at least the February-March visit of AfriForum, in which they discovered that if they pushed for the removal of AGOA, they don't only hurt black workers in South Africa, but that they actually hurt the very people on whose behalf they were campaigning. For example, white farmers, white factory owners, and foreign white automotive owners and so forth. And so they changed tack then already. And that was the point around about the 5th of March when I started changing tack about the fact that the only rationale behind this could only be the combination of two supremacisms. Our erstwhile white Afrikaner supremacism appealing to the white MAGA supremacism to hurt, for example, black government in South Africa. So clearly it seems as if we may not have achieved what we set out to achieve in the meeting with Donald Trump, if tariffs are still imposed, and if this is now in front of the Congress and then eventually to Senate. Whether it will win in the Senate is another matter, but I do think that there is between now and September in which to try and turn this around if there is going to be an attempt by South Africa.
What could we possibly do in a month's time that we couldn't have done in between March as well as today or yesterday?
I think that in the Senate, the majority that is needed is a much slimmer possibility. And therefore, I think that that's where a lot of diplomatic effort have to be taken. It's the kind of things that from the moment this idea was proposed by AfriForum in consultation with their MAGA equivalents, it's the kind of thing that I went about, for example, attacking the very foundation of that, the lie of a white genocide, the idea, for example, that we are beholden to China and that we are de-dollarizing at the behest of China and Russia, and so forth. I think that's what needs to be done, because it can be defeated in the Senate if there is sufficient work being done in the USA by both the government as well as by business. But you mustn't have the idea that South Africa, and particularly its government, is divided on this issue.
Yeah, and here's the thing: who then leads that diplomatic attempt, at least, to try and influence Senate members to look at things a bit differently? If we don't have an ambassador, since your expulsion, there's never been an ambassador. There was an attempt to have a special envoy with Mcebisi Jonas, but we see the reports in the ANC confirming that that too was rejected by the United States.
Look, I think that that is not the only locus of power. I found, for example, that my danger to this project was not only that I was speaking to senators and Congress members, but that I was, and we can use anyone for this, particularly business who have interests in the USA, can go out and do the think tanks, do the business associations, do the various kind of things that lobbyists and advocacy groups do. That really is what is required, and it doesn't take a special designation. In fact, I would say that you've actually just got to get that kind of work done in the USA, not because I think South Africa is going there begging, but South Africa needs to know what are our leverages. We don't stand empty-handed. We don't stand as powerful, for example, as other countries like China, but we don't stand empty-handed given the fact that we have some critical minerals, that we have other products, that we have American companies that make a lot of money in South Africa, and we need to mobilize a whole of South Africa effort to stop this, and it can be stopped by September if we are able to do the right kind of work. And I think that that was particularly the kind of threat that we did pose, and it's something that I believe needs to be done fully.
Yeah, what we've seen as well with the Trump administration, at least now with his second term, that there is this push to get access to mineral resources, and of course as part of the extractive economy, and we've seen what the deal that has now been reached with the DRC as well. But these would have been things that would have been proposed before. What will be different this time around?
I think it's implementation. I must say my exit report to the president had a very clear delineation of what are South Africa's leverages. It had a very clear case of scenarios that South Africa must be in the scenario between contingency and what I called mutuality in our relationship, in which we actually go there. We say, if you want, for example, platinum, which every car requires, and we've got 80% of the resources, then let us talk on the basis of that. We need to make this kind of approach. I don't think we must fall into the game of, are the tariffs 30%, are they 20%, are they this? I think we need to have a stronger, but I do think something else has happened in between, and that there was a very assertive BRICS summit in Brazil, in which BRICS countries began to realize that we are dealing with an unpredictable, even pernicious USA that has fomented a trade war, and therefore that's part of the contingency. We need to shift our eggs more and more into other markets as well, while not rejecting the US one, but speaking more realistically to the US one and getting out of the kind of mode in which a small combination of supremacisms would be able to do the kind of things that they are proposing. We've got to block the September Senate initiative that I think is on the cards.
All right. The bill itself mentions the sanctioning of certain individuals and ANC members, but it doesn't mention those people. There are some speculations, but do you think that there's a possibility at all, and from international relations perspective as well as international law, to sanction a sitting president?
I don't know. I think that those are the things that that you really need to be looking at. I think at this point, assume the worst so that you can get a better outcome. I think you've got to assume that there's a bloody-mindedness about knowing what the standing of the president is. If they think the president is particularly effective in mobilizing a multilateral response through the G20 presidency, through the BRICS membership that we do have, and other and South Africa's influence on the African continent. You must also remember one of the things that really angered the USA was when South Africa lost 18 soldiers in the Eastern DRC in defense of the critical minerals of the Eastern DRC. It is no accident that once South Africa withdrew from the DRC, the US moved on and announced the deal for the critical minerals of the DRC that they have. So South Africa is seen as an obstacle, and they will go for those who they think are the architects to South Africa's global role in unfolding a multilateral response to the kind of trade war and the kind of unpredictable, pernicious foreign policy that the US is prosecuting at this moment.
Okay, Ambassador, what do you mean that South Africa was defending critical minerals in the DRC? I thought that that mission was actually to try and stabilize the situation in the DRC, not necessarily to defend critical minerals.
Well, there was a destabilizing force, that there was a way in which, under instability, critical and rare earth metals were leaving the DRC. There are some who preferred that. And when you stabilize the situation, you make sure that things leave the DRC via the open market and not the black market.
All right. Just quickly then, Ambassador, we're running this poll this morning asking our viewers what do they make about the possibility of US targeted sanctions against ANC leaders. 3 options there. This is a bullying tactic. It worsens tensions. Dialogue is needed. Which option would you be voting for this morning?
All of the above.
All of the above. Why so?
Because it is a bullying tactic. We need to intensify our engagement, and it does worsen the tensions. And so there's not a choice between one or the other. I think it is an all of the above impact that it is having.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for your time. Ebrahim Rasool is the former South African ambassador to the United States on this bill that proposes targeted sanctions against ANC individuals as well.